Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Everyday Therapy, making therapy more approachable every day.
Yes.
I'm practicing my Minnesota Public Radio voice.
Yes. Well, yeah, and way to put everybody to sleep right at the beginning here.
I'm sleeping right now.
Well, it is early.
It is.
But it's never too early to get into how to improve our relationships with our partners. And so we're doing part 2 today.
Part 2 of 2.
Yes.
So last week we were talking about John Gottman, sort of a Goliath in the field of marriage therapy, couples therapy, and his very heavily researched methods, because he has researched down to heart rate and pulse about how couples interactions can affect each person's biology. So there's a lot more to it than that. I'm kind of
we're trying to give
getting into the weeds there. But
we don't want to get too into the weeds, but we do want you to understand, like, this is some of the best, most comprehensive research relationships that you're going to find. So.
Yes, exactly. So one of his main, when it comes to introducing his work, we talk about the sound relationship house. And last week we went over the first part. You got to have trust. The walls, right?
Yes, the walls of trust, and
the foundation.
The second wall.
The second wall, commitment.
Commitment.
Yep,
yes.
Trust and commitment. And then the floor is like understanding each other's worlds.
Right.
Love maps, so to speak.
Yeah, getting our love maps where we really are students of each other and we understand what makes the other tick, and we're able to do some things. My wife's birthday is coming up, and I can say this because this will be aired afterward, but I knew a particular hat that she really liked, and I knew she would really like this. And so I went searching around, I found it. I think it's going to be a really good fit, pardon the pun there, and I think that it's just nice, when somebody knows you so well that they can meet your needs when you don't even know what they are, but they do.
But because they were paying attention.
Yeah, so they can map it out, they can navigate and understand how to connect with you in meaningful ways.
Yes.
So it makes it kind of effortless, in the relationship. But it takes a while to get that and to do what he called those love maps that are so important. So
another one of the floors, I believe, is turning towards your partner instead of away.
Yes, the floor before that, I think, is sharing admiration and fondness.
Oh, you're right. We did do that, right? And we talked about love languages.
We did.
Last time.
Yes, as ways to connect. So today we want to take it to another level, another floor in this house that they talk about, and that's turning towards instead of away. And for you and I as marriage and family therapists, we're trained to really look at relationships almost like engineers, to look at patterns and look at systems and the way they're operating, and see that the relationship is like an operating system that has certain predictable patterns. And one of the things we notice is that people are moving towards, they're moving away from each other. And so we just notice that and bring that up. And what I like about what we do is it takes the blame and the shame out of it. It even takes the accusations out of it when we do it well, and just sort of say, hey, just notice how you guys are interacting. Like when you do this, you react this way, and then you move away, and then you move away. And let's learn how to move together more effectively. And so I think that really is very much related to turning towards each other rather than turning away. But first we have to understand how we are turning away instead of turning towards.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
So I think some of the things we do that I see is what Gottman talks about are these bids. Bids are ways we move towards each other. We make a bid, kind of like on The Price is Right. You're like, what's your bid?
Yep. You give your guess. You give your input.
You're like,
right?
Hey, I think that refrigerator is worth $1,800, and we find out if our bid is accurate or if it's close or how close. But then I love that on The Price is Right. Like if you get something wrong or if you guess wrong when you're up on stage, you'll have that Dun, 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 dun. And, I think that's kind of what happens with, right? It's so deflating. But that's exactly, I think, what happens in relationships. We make what Gottman says are these bids to connect.
Well, and when I first heard about this concept, it sounded so formal to me.
Yeah.
But I want to clarify, this is happening automatically all the time in relationships.
Yes.
So when I learned about this and then started noticing it while I was doing couples work, they happen throughout the session.
Yes.
And that's actually one way you can kind of see what's going on with the relationship is how they respond to one another's bids. So bids for connection can be extremely subtle. But once you start to kind of pick them out, you realize how many are actually going on. So there's ones that are a little more straightforward, such as like physical bids for connection, like reaching out to touch your partner's hand, right? Putting your arm around your partner. It's like anything where you're kind of asking for closeness, so to speak.
Right, we're looking for closeness.
Yep.
And it's I like that little thing on The Price is Right when we guess wrong, and there's that dun 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 dun, and that's really how we feel when we make a bid
and it's
towards
rejected,
our partner and they don't get it.
Or they, go ahead.
Yeah, or they reject it, or they're probably a lot of times not outright rejecting it. They just don't realize it, and then we kind of have that wah wah wah, and then we feel dejected, we feel rejected.
And then
we can personalize it, and then we're pulling away because we've just assumed they've moved away from me. And I made this really clear kind of bid to connect.
Totally.
And wah, wah, wah. And now we're kind of moving further apart because I'm ticked off. The partner's kind of noticing that I've distanced and like, well, what's going on? And then notice, and then the partner makes another bid to connect. It's missed. Sure. And then she's thinking, I don't know what his problem is. He's just really crabby lately. And then she moves away and he picks up that, she's moving further away.
Right.
I'm not going to pursue her. I'm doing all the pursuing. And so you see how we are missing this. We're missing the mark. And our bids, I really appreciate his research on it. One of the things I struggle with is I notice how our bids are sometimes very kind of passive aggressive. It's not very...
Oh, interesting.
Assertive.
Yeah, say more.
Well, so there's a funny episode on Everybody Loves Raymond. I love all of those, and it was something where Raymond, the main character, was saying to his wife, I don't like it when you do this, and she said, "When did you ever tell me you didn't like that I do this?" He said, "Well, I made it really clear when I went, ha." And when I sighed, I made it really clear. And she said, "When did you sigh? And how am I supposed to know that means you don't like me doing something?" And he's like, "Oh, right. Like I have to spell it out." And so I think what happens is we do that. Like the when we sigh, we're trying to communicate.
Or here's another one I thought of. In past dating experiences, I had someone say like, "Well, just let me know when you have time for me." So, again, that is a bid for connection because it's saying, I want to spend time with you, like the subtext, right?
Yes.
But the passive-aggressive part is like, well, you seem so busy, I guess just let me know whenever you have time for me, right?
Right.
But that is a bid for connection using sort of sarcasm, right?
Right. Yeah, we're just being passive-aggressive, again, rather than being assertive. And I don't want to be too critical of it. I think the reason we do this is because we're not fully aware even of what I'm feeling, what I'm needing.
Yep.
How do I get it? Yep. And so we find these ways. And so it is, we're playing games a little bit. But when we understand, it's like learning to speak a different language. So when my partner goes, that means he really doesn't like something or she really doesn't want to do something. I can lean into that and say,
sure.
So, all right, tell me more, because it looks to me like you don't want to do this when I hear you sigh like that. Right. So we're learning to lean into it. And what's cool, I love The Price is Right when they get the actual retail price and they guess it perfectly.
Yeah.
And they, there's this bell that goes off, ding, ding, somebody actually guessed the exact price. And when the person realizes, my bid was perfect, there's lots of bonuses. They get extra money, and they get the prize, and there's a celebration. And I think in relationships, that's kind of what happens when we recognize the bid and it's being recognized. There's this real connection, and it's really fun because it doesn't happen a lot, and we make bids all the time, and they're getting rejected throughout the day. So it can really be fun, and it can be super deflating, but it is practical.
So when you're working with couples and you're kind of introducing this topic of bids for connection or explaining it, what do you have any guidance for them about how to start to notice these in each other? Like if a couple was saying what should we look for? How do I know when my partner's doing a bid for connection?
Yeah, I like to focus on the nonverbals because most of communication is nonverbal. I was watching this really fun documentary on body language, and I think it was on Amazon Prime. And this thing on body language was really underscoring what we already know, that most of communication is nonverbal.
Yes.
However, it just really underscored how much we are communicating in nonverbal fashions. And so I like to go there. So I could kind of give some examples here of,
let's hear them.
I think, some common nonverbal bids that Gottman would say as well. First of all, there's affectionate touching. Okay. Now, this isn't making out. This is, affectionate touching. It's a slap. It's a handshake. It's a pat on the back. Okay. Guys do this all the time. Guys, hey, how's it going? And we punch each other in the shoulder affectionately. And guys, we don't hug. But what are we doing when we kind of reach out and we punch each other or pat each other hard on the back? It's a bid to connect. It's a nonverbal. And when we're communicating, hey, I'm really happy to see you. And this is great. You're super important to me.
Yeah.
And it's a bid to connect. And I think it's even more. It's an expression of my desire to connect with you. And so it's my desire, and it's hoping that it's going to be reciprocated. But it's not just with guys. It's happening in romantic relationships where we're doing that. It can be a kiss. It can be a hug.
Yep.
So that's one of them.
Okay. Affectionate touching.
Affectionate touching. Facial expressions are huge.
Oh, yes. I use those a lot in therapy, like building rapport with clients.
Sure.
And I don't realize I'm doing it, but having an open, your eyebrows raised, smiling.
Yes.
Leaning towards someone, right? Anyway, go ahead.
Communicates a ton.
Yep.
In this documentary I was watching, they were highlighting people, and they could just by watching people in a park or somewhere public and how they interacted, they were highlighting basically bids, nonverbal bids. Oh my gosh,
that's so cool.
And saying, this couple, they're not together. They're together, but this is not going to work out.
Oh my gosh.
And you could tell one of the things they even said was, look at the feet. If the feet are pointing away from the person, the feet say a lot.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So if the feet are pointing away from the person they're talking to, they're looking for their exit strategy, so to speak.
Whoa.
And
that's wild.
So I think that's not just our feet. It's also our face, and could be our femur and any other F word we're looking for body expressions that we're communicating to people all the time. In fact, what do we say? In our licensing area of licensed marriage family therapists, we say all behavior is communication.
Right.
And so, but more specifically with facial expressions, smiles are huge.
Okay.
Smiles communicate a lot. We do know from researching with babies tend to look at people who are smiling far more than people who aren't. What's interesting about this show that I was watching too is that
I really want to watch this.
Yeah, this is really, really fascinating. They were saying that people who have been born blind exhibit the same kind of facial expressions, nonverbal behaviors, even though they haven't. So what they're saying is, even though they have never seen these, it's not learned behavior.
Oh my goodness.
We do this
naturally. And
they were saying in our brain, it's that part of our brain that we're trying to communicate. It's really, it flows through the part of physical expression. And that happens first. So look, I'm doing it now. Didn't even realize it. And so we use our hands to gesture and to communicate. And so all I'm saying is that it's not just facial expressions, it's all of these nonverbals. So we've got affectionate touching, we have facial expressions. There's playful touching too. And so that can be tickling.
Sure.
Wrestling. Dancing. Right?
Yep.
Or sometimes just a gentle bump or a gentle nudge.
Yep.
And now notice some of these are easy to understand. Like somebody smiles at me, I get it. Okay, they're all right. But, sometimes the touching, we're not ready for it. We don't want it or whatever. And so someone gives me a budge and it's like, dude, watch where you're going.
Right.
So it's really important to understand what's behind this and kind of give each other the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
There's also what some have called affiliating gestures, such as when you open a door for somebody, or you let somebody have a seat, that you're somewhere and you say, hey, well, take my seat. Okay, you can have my seat here. Giving something to somebody, like, hey, here's a glass of water, or here's something I can tell you need. Those can be bids, nonverbal bids for connection as well. And then there's vocalizing, obviously, but it's not just saying what we need, because a lot of times we don't know how to do that. But laughing is a great way.
Yeah,
it's
good
nonverbal. Sighing, we already talked about. That's one where we sigh and we're trying to communicate, or we groan and things like that. And so notice, like, we are communicating all of the time.
Yeah.
Non-verbally. And we are using our body to express our intentions, our desires, our bids to connect. And when somebody understands it, outstanding, wonderful. Like, there's intimacy, because and there are different levels of intimacy, and one of the deepest levels is when you don't even need words and you just understand each other. And so that's fabulous. And what happens when we don't? And more often than not, we don't understand, and we're not moving towards each other because we're just missing the bids to connect. And as we talked about, now you're rejecting me. Now you're distancing from me. And so that kind of goes into kind of those four horsemen of the apocalypse we talked about last episode too, where we start to distance. And, there's that we hear it. We hear it. So that's kind of what I go to in terms of examples. I go to some of those nonverbals because they're so powerful.
Okay, great. Now, there are other ways to do bids for connection.
But wait, there is more.
Call now.
Do share.
I think there are ways. I remember I was watching a Gottman training video, and they were doing a little segment on bids for connection. And one of the ones that I wouldn't have maybe picked out it was a recording of a couple, because they were in the Love Lab. That's Gottman's research, where this couple, couples go and live at this apartment, and like they videotape a lot of their interactions. And so this couple was, the woman looked outside and was like, oh, there's a, cardinal sitting out there on the branch. She was looking out the window and noticed that. And the husband was in the other room. Yeah. And so, but like within earshot. So again, that was a bid for connection to say, I'm noticing this thing.
Right.
And he had the opportunity to either ignore it or say like, oh, wow, cool, or whatever. Like,
yes.
And I think what ended up happening in the video is he didn't acknowledge it at all. And that was noteworthy, because it wasn't like she was saying, hey, let's spend time together, or hey, how are you? She wasn't asking him a question.
Right.
She was just looking at something that was interesting to her. And that in itself is a bid for connection.
That's such a great example.
Yes.
And I think it highlights how, with a little bit of introspection, I think we can all conclude that, you know what, my preoccupation with my phone and my multitasking, which research shows we cannot do very well, really gets in the way. Plus our limited attention span that we know we don't have attention spans as long as we used to with everything kind of so immediate in social media.
Yeah.
How hard it is
Yep.
to really be dialed in and attuned to these bids. It's harder probably than ever.
Yep. Exactly.
Glad you mentioned that. That's such a super easy thing.
Yeah. That's an easy thing.
Yeah. He could be watching television, really engrossed in a show, and she's like, oh, look at the cardinal. Mm-hmm. I said, look at the cardinal, and
right. And she could walk away from that kind of thinking, like, depending on how this typically goes for them, she could be like, oh, he's not paying attention to me. Or she could, like, double down and try to say it louder or whatever. But it's more like over time, you can see how these little interactions could really build. So we're looking at one isolated one, but think about how many of those can go on in a day. Yeah. And how many, like if you're missing them consistently, if one partner's missing them consistently, then it's like, wow, I just don't feel seen.
I don't feel seen. I don't feel heard. I don't feel validated at all. I'm glad we're spending more time. We kind of thought we'd be able to introduce this quickly and kind of keep going, but this is so important, I think, and because the rewards are great. And the sense of rejection is just as great when we're missing out on this.
Exactly.
And I do think that just how distracted we're and how busy we are too. Like that could be a whole episode that we do. It could even be a book on all the things that get in the way from these bids of connection.
Right.
And it is such an important part. It's not just like, hey, this is a cool little concept that we came up with. This is what Gottman found in their research. Like this is integral to being able to connect with people. And so I also thought how for some of us this is easier and some of this is harder because some of us, as we talk about in dialectical behavioral therapy, some of us are just more hardwired emotionally. We're more feelings driven. And so those people are going to be more attuned to bids.
Sure.
And then some of us, it's not bad at all that some of us are more facts driven, which is fabulous. We need that.
Yep.
Tax season, figuring out problems and things. We need people that are more logic driven, but they may not get that. Now, if I'm more feelings driven, I might be in opposites to attract. And so let's say if I'm more feelings driven, I'm with my partner who's more facts driven, I'm going to expect that my partner is a lot like me.
Yep.
And so when I do give a bid, I have an expectation that you get this.
Sure.
It's clear as day. How can you miss this? And so my unmet expectations really cause greater division. Now, I'm also thinking for people that grow up in very traumatic environments or there's been abuse or there's been addictions in the home. We grow up in homes like that where we become very hypervigilant.
Yes.
And so we're very attuned to how everybody feels. And so, again, there's that discrepancy of ability to be attuned to bids. And then we kind of think, well, my partner is wrong because my partner isn't like me. And because it's so easy for me, I do this without thinking.
Yep.
And so this is just huge. As we're talking about it in my mind, I'm thinking there's so much application for this and what gets in the way.
Exactly. And it's part of the sound relationship house.
Right. It's huge.
What else? Do you think we should move on to the next thing, or?
Yeah. Well, what time do we get? How much time do we get left?
We're at about 24 minutes.
So let's talk about like positive perspective. That's the next floor.
Okay.
And then maybe we'll do part 3.
Oh yeah.
We'll do that next time. That'll be fun.
That will.
So we have to have a positive perspective. What are we talking about here? And Gottman and his floors to having a sound house. A positive perspective is really when we have positive sentiments that really kind of override the negative things.
Right.
And I think what they also found too in some of their research is that when they argue, if they use affectionate terms towards their partner while they're arguing, that's a good example of this.
Good call.
So it's like, honey, what I mean by this is whatever, versus you don't say honey at all. You just say,
right.
What I mean is this.
Yep.
But if we're using, hey, babe, or hey, honey, or darling, or whatever affectionate term, those are good examples of having a positive perspective that really overrides the negative.
Yep. On Gottman.com, there's actually a quiz. How positively do you view your partner?
Ooh, that's interesting.
If you want to take the quiz, you can even go and see.
So where's that quiz again?
Gottman.com. I think you could just Google Gottman Positive Perspective Quiz.
Yes.
When my partner is in a bad mood, I usually feel like I'm going to get blamed for some problem. True or false?
Wow.
When my partner's in a bad mood, I usually fear a storm of negative emotion may be headed my way. True or false? When my partner's in a bad mood, I usually assume I am about to get personally attacked. True or false? And then expect that my personality is about to get criticized. True or false? And lastly, just want my partner to be more positive. True or false? So it's short.
Super practical.
But even that is so telling. Just, again, a lot of it is like when there's emotion or anything negative coming from my partner, do I think they're about to come at me? Right?
Yes.
And that has to do with how positively or negatively you may see your partner, right?
That's so true. Mm-hmm. That is so true. And notice what I like inherent in a lot of those questions is the emphasis that I think people can miss taking the quiz is the emphasis is on me.
Right. Exactly.
What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Like,
right.
I might have a negative perspective or conclusion about my partner, but that's me. It's not that my partner is this way. And I don't know, people, when we take a quiz like that, we realize this is all about me here. I think, what happens too in relationships is we typically are drawn to our opposites. Yeah. And so we see that and we think, oh, I need that. Intuitively, we know it. And then we move towards that. There's that movement piece. So we move towards that. And so as we move towards that, we like it as we're moving towards it. But then we realize this person, oh, I don't like that. They're so this way.
Sure.
They're so driven.
Yep.
We may be drawn to the fact that they can get a lot done. They're really disciplined and I'm not. And, I just love that I so respect that. And then it gets annoying, like, gosh, just take the foot off the gas. Let's relax, and why are you so uptight? Now, all of a sudden I'm characterizing my partner in negative terms.
Sure.
And so, well, what is it? What is my partner disciplined and driven or just uptight and kind of obnoxious? Well, they're both. And I think what happens in relationships, though, is we move then towards defining the other more in terms of the weaknesses of their personality type, and we're not defining them anymore at all by their positive. And we want to have a good dialectical balance.
Sure.
And I think Gottman would say even more than that, we need to have it more heavily weighed towards the positive.
Right. Exactly.
So that's a good question for us, maybe not taking the quiz, but we can just ask ourselves, what's my bent? Am I more heavily weighed towards the positive about my spouse, or am I more heavily weighed towards the negative?
Exactly. Well, and even if you're thinking about your own partner or your own relationship and you're realizing, gosh, I think I might be more towards the negative, that is something that can definitely be looked at. It's not like you're doomed if you are having this negative perspective, right? It's just like, it's good to know now, catch it now, kind of realize what's going on. And then you can, either get help in the form of therapy, or you can keep doing your own research and kind of look at and talk with your partner about it and be like, hey, I came across this, thing, this quiz, or kind of Gottman's work or whatever it is, and start a conversation about it.
Absolutely. I think it's really understandable that I want to hang on to the negatives because I'm so hurt sometimes by my partner.
Yep.
And then I define my partner solely in that term of how my partner has hurt me. And now I see my partner only in that way. And we've talked a lot about being dialectical throughout all our podcasts, it seems.
Yep.
And how unfair that is. It's unfair that this person hurt me. It's equally unfair to this person, my partner, that I'm defining my partner only in these terms now. Like this is the only thing that defines this person. There's nothing redemptive. And while I want to hold on to that negative bent, I I choose this. And so the irony, the tragic irony is I choose to hold on to this and think I'm justified in it because of how much this person hurt me. And then we blame it on the other person for my negative bent. And
sure,
it's really important that we understand this is my choice. Yep. It's understandable that I want to hold on to this. And it's not effective. It's not accurate because nobody is just bad all the time. So while it makes sense, it's understandable. It's not effective, and we can choose to start moving towards our partner again by choosing how we think about them and thinking about them and reminding ourselves about the positive things. And I think that's some of the research I've come across on forgiveness really highlights that we try to remember intentionally and recall positive things about my partner as well.
Totally. Well, hopefully we've given some helpful guidelines as you think about the Sound Relationship House, which is the work of John Gottman. And we will be back again next time with the final pieces of the Sound Relationship House. See you on the next one, everybody.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.